Howdy, folks, and welcome to the SoundAppraiser TuneScore podcast. My name's Carrie Nightingale, and with me, as always, is Kevin Niebrick. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. There's a lot of smoke in the air from the nearby wildfires.
Oh, that's good to hear. We should all be able to breathe a lot easier now. Tonight on the show, we've got a trio of songs that we think, at least we thought before we listened to them with a great deal of scrutiny, have top-tier melodies. Each one for a different reason. It's not necessarily the vocal, but we're going to be examining and sharing our thoughts on Familiar Feeling by Moloko, Feel It Still by Portugal the Man, and Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. We'll start, because we go in alphabetical order with these song titles, we'll start with Familiar Feeling, which was one of my recommendations. As something that I've heard recently, even though it's nearly 20 years old, as having a very strong melody. So since that was my choice, Kevin, go ahead and litigate.
All right, I'll break it down. Let's see. So I loved it. I'm glad that you suggested it because I had actually never heard this song before. So it was nice. It was new to me. As far as composition goes, breaking it down, the strongest two things that I felt were great about it were definitely the melody and the rhythm. The harmony, I could hear it was present, but it was kind of buried on the track. So I gave it about a middle score for that. Lyrics were a little bit better than average. As far as the melody goes, it's not as memorable as the other two songs that we listened to today, but it's fairly complex and it's very interesting. I think that lyrically, it's an excellent representation and it describes attraction well. I took points away because it was a bit repetitive towards the end. And I also got a quick shot of moroseness to the lyrics. The message being or sounding very one-sided. In one of the lines, the other person is questioned for having doubts. And so I kind of got a creepy vibe out of there. But for the most part, I thought it was pretty good. The one thing I really liked about the composition of this song is that it quickly builds into something else. So it feels like three different songs right off the bat. The intro is by itself just the vocalist. And then you add an acoustic guitar and the beat changes a little bit. And then you add some rhythm to it and it changes yet again. And it becomes more interesting each time. And each segment by itself was very nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I thought, as far as composition goes, I rated it very highly with 3.4 out of 4 total points. Most of that obviously went to the melody, which I gave the full point to, and the rhythm almost a full point. I thought lyrics and harmony were also pretty high. I really like this song for being something that I have heard, I would say, several times recently. I actually went on Amazon to look and see about buying the MP3. Turns out I already had it. But had no recollection of ever buying it or listening to it before. I think for me, the vocal melody on this track dances just about as much as the people in the music video. In the hook especially, the variations in both pitch and placement help to make it extremely memorable. You've got the rhythm with the disco drums and that over-caffeinated bass line. And if anybody knows about over-caffeinated, it's probably us two, right? That rhythm is augmented further by bits of percussion, which, granted, some of that percussion is probably digitally programmed, but I'm not knocking that for that reason. Harmony, I think, takes a bit of a back seat, like you said, but I think it's still well fit to the melody. And the story, the lyrics, let's talk about that for a minute, because I thought it was about the message that I got, or the theme of the lyrics that I got, was that it's a story of wordless exchanges on a first encounter, but that encounter is as comfortable as a decades-long friendship. I feel like that might be wishful thinking, but that's why I'm here listening to the song. I like a little wishful thinking once in a while. So overall, the composition I thought was really strong. And I don't have much to say about the performance. There are a lot of moving parts. The melody, like you said, is complex, as is the way that the singer, Rasheen Murphy, harmonizes with herself. in a couple of spots. I thought that was excellent. And I would say the same thing that you did as far as the arrangement goes in production in that section. It's the chorus. The hook is the chorus, and the chorus is the hook. So it's highly repetitive. Each chorus plays the hook 4 times, and that's the entire chorus. And we hear the full chorus twice in this arrangement. And this was just the condensed radio edit that we were listening to. There's a longer official version to this song that I assume is like a club mix, or maybe not a mix, but the original is probably the one that's played in clubs.
Carrie, so you're telling me that they shortened this song for the radio?
Yes.
I really wish they had done that with American Pie, if I'm being honest.
You mean you went to the levee and the levee was dry? Tell me more. So you get in this one, in under 4 minutes, you get that hook 9 times at a minimum, and then more of like the partial hook at the very beginning and then at the very end as well. Like, no wonder it's so catchy. Like, they are really getting at you by playing that hook so many times, and it works. So what notes did you have, Kev, about the production and the performance?
Going off what you just said too, I just want to say that, I don't like repetition. For me, it's just kind of jarring and unnecessary. I feel like if your vocals are adding cadence to the piece, like that might be nice to have it in there for rhythm. But really, I mean, that the time, the space that you're trying to fill could easily just be empty, devoid of vocals, and you could just have the instrumentation going on in the background. I think that would have been more enjoyable for me personally. But you're right, repetition is important. It's key to getting people to remember those hooks and really digging your barbs into people. But for me, I think it's can be overdone. That was part of that's as far as composition goes. I took away some points for that. As far as performance goes, I thought almost full marks across the board. I took away just a point for accuracy, 0.5 out of 0.6. This is a really complex piece. The arrangement itself is complex. The vocals are very energetic. I dug the vocals. I imagine most of this is digital construction. And so I did take a point away as per our conversation about NLE Chapa.
Do you remember the date of this alleged conversation?
I don't, actually. Do you?
I think that was episode 2.
2, maybe? Yeah, like just recently. Yeah.
Man, I like that song, Narrow Road.
It's good.
I've gone back and listened to it a couple times, despite my relatively low scoring of it. But hey, that's not why we're here tonight. This interview is not about NLE Chapa.
Okay. But yeah, that's how I felt about performance. Almost full marks across the board. As far as production goes for this particular song, same deal. Full marks for arrangement. Again, it's a complex arrangement. Mix, I dropped it down a point just simply because that harmony feels buried to me. Like I could barely hear it, and it sounds like digitally manipulated in some way. So like almost full marks, but it just kind of irked me a little bit. There's a lot going on here though, and it must have been quite the effort to get all that stuff mixed appropriately and arranged. And it does a good job of they did a good job of highlighting different instruments at appropriate times. So I did like that. How did you feel about this one?
As far as the appeal goes, I really like a positive message more and more in my old age. And the way that I read the lyrics and heard them in listening to the song, I thought that it was a more positive message, even though it might be wishful thinking, like it said earlier. Mm-hmm. But I like it especially when it's delivered with such gusto and, I'll say, impressive musical talent, if for no other reason than the vocals on the track are impressive. It's an intricate melody with a lot of dynamics. I feel like it keeps the song fresh after repeated listens. Speaking of repeated listens, I would say that this one is best listened to when you've promised your friends to join them at the club, but you're contemplating ditching them because you're just not feeling it, and you just need a little bump in the right direction. Like something could happen tonight.
Nice. Going into the appeal for me, pretty high across the board. Emotion just barely hit me. It did hit me. I get the feel of the song. I don't disagree with you at all about the message of the song and it being effective and a accurate portrayal. I did have that one, that one thing where it kind of sounds a little creepy to me, but it didn't stick. The mood of the song, I think, directed me in towards a more positive note. So I did feel it that way. Emotion, so 1.3 out of 1.6, pretty high. Innovation, almost 3/4 credit. I thought there was something different here. There was a lot going on. I thought it was very intriguing, and I thought it was interesting. Repeat listenability for me is a little bit lower, just because again it's a bit repetitive. But did a good job. I give it a final score for me was a 7.7. What was yours?
Mine was 8.0.
That was pretty close.
Was my final tune score. So we're really getting this calibrated, aren't we?
I hope so. I think that's what I'm thinking every time we have a pretty similar score.
Yeah. So I think we're getting a little better on that. So that song was Familiar Feeling by Moloko. As with all of the tracks that we review here on the TuneScore podcast, go out, check them out. Let us know if you agree, if you disagree, where we're wrong, where we're right, where we hit the nail on the head, that sort of thing. But I think it's probably a good time to take a quick break before we get into our next song, which is Feel It Still by Portugal the Man. This commercial break is brought to you by Camel Toe brand tea bags. May we offer you one hump or two. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks, to the TuneScore podcast. Our next song is Feel It Still by Portugal the Man. And this is something that we thought before reviewing it would probably have a top tier melody. Kevin, since you recommended this song for us to listen and review, I will go ahead and prosecute first on the composition. So the scores that I gave were a full 1 out of 1 point for the melody, 0.7 out of a point for lyrics, 0.9 for rhythm, and 0.7 for harmony. I thought this was a really strongly composed song. My favorite lyric was, "Your love is an abyss for my heart to eclipse." Beautiful. The rhythm provided by the drums, percussion, the bass, and even slightly augmented, I suppose you could say, by the horn section as well. It's all well suited to the song, being something of a throwback to either or both of the 60s or the 80s. I can't tell if it's a doo-wop group like the Marvelettes maybe, or Prince reincarnate that I'm listening to, but it's good. The lyrics are interesting, with plenty of hooks, repeated musical ideas that sound good to the ear. It might be the high falsetto voice, but that main vocal melody is excellent, and it's very memorable with occasional wide leaps, rhythmic intonation, and stepwise bouncing. I really liked the composition of this track. I thought it was really strong. Kevin, you don't have much to defend here, but go ahead and defend.
I don't technically disagree with anything you said. I rated the melody and the rhythm a little bit higher than the harmony and the lyrics. The problem I have with it is just that they literally stole the melody for this song from Mr. Postman, the Marvelettes that you brought up. I was trying to think, like, why does this sound so familiar? And I remember thinking that the first time I heard it. I remember learning that fact and then forgetting. And so that's why I brought it up, because I was like, oh, that's a great catchy tune. And it is. It totally is. That there's a deeper conversation to have there about, like, whether or not, when does that stop becoming okay? When is it appropriate to do, lifting a melody or a riff, lifting an entire set of lyrics. I've done it in my own work, but I don't do it specifically. I don't make money off my music. I think that once you get into that realm of like, oh, we're going to start making money off this, then it's an idea to, I don't know if we can include that song or if that we need to rework it. But the melody itself is amazing. It does a really good job. I think they took what the Marvelettes did and went just even a little bit further and turned it into something above and beyond. So I still gave it a pretty high score for melody, and the only detraction was that. The lyrics themselves, I felt like it was more of an abstract piece than anything. I think there's I read some interviews about this song with the band, with the songwriters, that it kind of,
Which of the 12 songwriters were
yeah.
there?
I think it was as far as I know, it's the vocalist, the lead vocalist for the song, but I'm not sure. Um, I would imagine that some of the word choices, some of the lines, were probably chosen maybe not because of their clearness, conciseness, ends up being more of an ambiguous or haphazard piece. And I think that's because some of the word choices is more to fit cadence, to fit rhythm. Maybe the words are chosen to be evocative and in and of themselves. And then if that's the case, then that was done very well. Because, yeah, that vocal rhythm, the vocal melody itself is amazing. It's very memorable. Even if it's somewhat unclear, the message of the song, it doesn't matter because it doesn't need to be, the lyrics don't need to be strong in this case to make this song great. They could have spit gibberish and it would have still been a great song. In fact, they received a lot of international acclaim for this song from people who probably didn't understand what they were singing about. Doesn't matter, the song itself stands. It's pretty great. As far as the performance goes, couldn't give it full credit, but it was pretty well done. I think the feel was nice and strong, as well as accuracy. But how did you feel about the performance? Did you rate it similarly?
Yeah, so I granted both accuracy and feel zero point 0.5 out of zero point 0.6 for the performance. I thought every part, and there are a lot of parts, every part sounded well played and intentional. I didn't go out looking for mistakes or flubs or misintonations or anything like that in any of the parts, but everything sounded good.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not necessarily about full credit versus 5/6 credit.
Mm-hmm.
It was strong, and it was not Giant Steps by John Coltrane, So maybe that's why it's not full credit out of me. But no, I thought it was really strong. Now, if you want, you said, maybe we should have a conversation about when is it okay to lift a melody or do something like that.
Totally.
Uh, if you want, we can have that conversation now. I've got spare time.
Okay. Do you want to wait
So,
till the end of the song or do you want to?
yeah, sure.
All right. But yeah, we should talk about that. Let's come back to that because I have a lot to say and I'm still on the fence. I'm a pretty much a fence sitter. So
That reminds me of Flagpole Sitta,
that's
which
a
is
good one.
another song we should probably
Why haven't we done that one yet? That should have been on the
review.
melody. This should have been on this one.
I think that's more of a rhythm song.
You think? All right.
Audience, if you think that Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger is more of a melody song or a rhythm song, let us know in the comments below and we'll take it into consideration. I'm going to go ahead and jump in about production on this because I did give it the full marks on production. So, composition aside, credit aside, I thought the production gave plenty of memorable musical ideas outside that basic composition, ranging from the brass counter melodies to the low pass filter on "Is It Coming? Is It Coming?" to some extra vocal stabs like "Hey" at the end of the choruses, and that I called it the evil clown laugh at the end of the bridge. That
Yeah.
hee 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 ho 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 ho. I feel like this is a band that really knows how to punctuate everything except for their own name.
Brilliant. I don't disagree with anything you said. I think that I gave it about almost full credit for both. I thought both were great. I think maybe it was lacking in something that would really wow me, but impressive it was. So speaking like Yoda, I don't know why. Sorry about that. Um, as far as appeal goes, I think that I feel like my scores are very strange about this. So post disambiguation, like I went and I tracked down some more information about this track after I reviewed it. So that might be why some of my scores are close to what I feel, and I stand behind them. Before I learned what the song was about specifically, I just went off what I could disambiguate on my own by deep diving in the lyrics and kind of listening to the song multiple times. Um, 3/4 credit for emotion. It just missed me the feeling or the emotion that it was supposed to draw out of me. It kind of missed me a little bit, so I gave it 3/4 credit. Innovation, I felt I had to take off a point because of they lifted the melody, but repeat listenability is extremely high. It's 1.4 out of 1.6. It's a really good track. It stands on its own. It's amazing. After I figured out what the song was about, I think I like it even more, just a little bit. The song's message, in particular, speaks to me specifically, in a way that I would argue is unspoken and maybe taboo, in this country at least, and it has been throughout my lifetime. I mentioned earlier I consider myself a fence sitter. I'm not swayed by things one way or the other sometimes, especially when it comes to politics. This song specifically is written, whoever wrote the lyrics. I'm not sure if it was the lead vocalist or whatnot, but based on the idea of like we get two choices in this country. Do you want to vote for the Democrat that you don't like or the Republican that you don't like? was and those are your options. So I thought it was interesting. I didn't understand that. I could not read the lyrics and tell you that that's what it's about. So that's kind of where it misses me on emotion. And that's about all I have to say about that. How do you feel, appeal wise, on this one?
I have sort of similar thoughts as far as the central theme. Is there one? I have a little bit of a theory that I'll go into in a moment about that.
Okay.
Uh, but basically, no, I don't think that there's a central theme to the lyrics. It reads as sort of a garbled mess. It's not a bad garbled mess, it's a well delivered mess of lyrics that sound good together.
I guess you could say that about everything you and I work on.
Except for the sound good part.
Oh, there you go.
So, here's what I think. When you take this song as a whole, every part of it makes the listener feel it still. It's got a lot of interesting it's got a lot of interesting things going on that make it sound fun on first hearing, but I think when you dive a little bit deeper, might reveal some darker undertones. You got that evil clown laugh that I mentioned at the end of the bridge, or since it's at the end of the bridge, maybe it's a troll. I don't
Yeah.
know. There's the reference to call the gravedigger, fight a war for peace.
Again,
I'll get into my
some of those words I would argue are picked just to be
for the
evocative.
sound,
Yeah, or for sound. Yeah, either one.
sound and provocation probably. But the provocation is only going to work with an English speaking audience, and there's the intentionality maybe, whereas the broad international acclaim that you mentioned that the song received, that part of intentionality is lost on non-English speakers, I suppose. But I feel like it's got a shiny surface, but there's even more below it. And my scores were probably right around yours, just a tenth of a point lower in each of the three appeal categories. Now, my theory is revealed when I tell you about when this song is best listened to. And I feel like Feel It Still is best listened to when you're experiencing intense nostalgia for both your triumphs and failures of the past, be they lost loves, your tenure in a doo-wop group, or the Occupy movement. That's if there's a central theme, I think that it's probably about the Occupy movement or something similar of a socioeconomic political movement. I mean, they are based in Portland.
That's true. Yeah, I would get that. I mean, it. That's the one thing that rings true. Like that, you can hear just from listening to the song that there's a political message in there somewhere, but it just doesn't. It's not clear enough to come through. And so, had I not read that article about what they were thinking about when they wrote it and what it's basically about, I would not have known. So yeah, it's just kind of lost. But I mean, this song in particular, we picked this song. I picked this song because of the melody. I rated it lower because they lifted the melody like straight from a different song, and they punched it up a little bit, and it's different. But this song in and of itself, the melody is great. Like it is very strong, and I think that the melody carries this song, and it really makes it stand out. So I don't think, yeah, again, the lyrics not so important really, as long as the cadence is there, the words sound good, they make you feel something, makes you move. And it's a well constructed song.
So well constructed, in fact, I bestowed a tune score of 8.0 out of 10
Nice.
for this track.
That's pretty high coming from you.
It might be my highest yet. I think I think the Moloko song was 8.0 out of 10 as well.
Nice, that's fair.
So, Kevin, what was your tune score for it?
Mine, I felt a little less about it. I gave it a 7.4, but it's nice. It's still very strong. It's a good song.
That's your lowest score yet.
It might be.
My gosh. So, no, that's definitely not the case. But I feel like your score was diminished a little bit by the fact that the melody or parts of the melody were appropriated or interpolated from a previous song,
Yeah.
another song. Now, I think this is probably the right time for us to have that conversation. When is it appropriate and what can you do about it? Sometimes you hear something and you don't necessarily remember it. It enters more into the subconscious than the conscious. And I bet that's probably true of our final song we'll be talking about tonight. That melody or bass line, that enters the subconscious. Like that just sticks with you. And you might not always remember where it's from, but it's now a part of you. And when you use something that's from your subconscious in an artistic creation, sometimes it's unintentional like that. But you find out and you give credit to the original creators. But just because you're lifting that one element of your composition from another composition, from someone else's work, it doesn't mean that your work is less valuable. Not necessarily, as long as you're giving due credit. And that's why there were 12 writers on this song, 5 of the band members, 2 producers, and then 5 from the Mr. Postman song. So I think it's appropriate. Now, when you take something and refuse to give credit, and I think there are probably a lot of instances. I think we alluded to Led Zeppelin doing that in our last episode. That's something a little bit different. When you give credit and you take something and make it into something different, you might recognize as a listener that this track sound. Why is this so familiar?
Yeah.
Why does this sound like? God, what is that song that this reminds me of? That's not a bad thing, because it only reminds you of Mr. Postman, right?
But I do think that you're kind of riding the coattails of somebody else's work that like is conveying maybe either a similar emotion. You would pick something that has a similar feeling that you would want to evoke, or emotion, or something that you're trying to bring up that nostalgia. And that might be the case. Like, hey, we're going for nostalgia. We picked that one song, or maybe it was just stuck in their head at the time. From what I understand, that like from the get-go, they knew they wanted a melody that sounded like that. So they interpolated that melody and transformed it into this.
They'd been feeling it since 1966.
Yeah, there you go. And it's arguable. Again, I'm on the fence about this. Like, I took away points because I think that it's fair to take away points for that. I don't think that my one concern is I don't want to tell an artist how to create. or how not to create. I think that's wrong. I think that there's a long history in the hip hop industry of sampling songs.
Mhm.
In my own works, I steal stuff from, like, I rewrote rearranged composition of Tears for Fears Mad World because that's a fun song. I threw in the solo from House of the Rising Sun because it fit and it was fun. And I changed it up a little bit. It's that little bitty change, like fucking Vanilla Ice.
Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, dude. This has been going on for years, and we're still on the, there's probably a definite legal definition for. There's probably a line that you can cross or not cross. Um, as far as my own stuff goes, like, I'm not making money off my music. So I'm having fun and I'm creating, and maybe I'm sampling things from here and there. I think that's fair. I think it's more of like collage art at that point, and I think it's fun. Would I put that on an album? Maybe not. I might have that conversation of like, I should pull that solo and replace it with something that's unique and my own. But if I'm playing live, I would absolutely play that solo because that might be a lot of fun for the audience to be like, oh, I didn't expect to hear that, you know? And that might even be like legally a very black and white issue. Like that might not be okay as far as ASCAP's concerned, as far as the, music industry is concerned.
Oh
But
yeah, that's not halal at all.
that's not what?
Halal.
I need a
That's
dictionary.
the that's the it's sort of like the Muslim version of kosher.
Oh, okay.
It's not approved.
Yeah, very, very much so, right? And but again, I really like this song. I think they did an excellent job. I'm uncomfortable giving them full credit for something that they didn't compose all of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
That's a
well,
tough one.
I
That's a tough
certainly
line.
understand. Sorry.
That's a tough line. I don't know. I don't know what's right or wrong in this situation.
I think that doing it the honest way, giving credit where credit's due, and hopefully without a big copyright battle in the U.S. legal and justice system is probably appropriate. They took, so the band and the producers, they might have lifted that melody, that basic. They might have taken that basic idea and used it to form the hook of this new song, but they gave credit where it was due, and they used it to create an otherwise original work, which still has elements of a lot of different things. And we could probably, if time and our audience's attention span were not an issue, we could we could probably get a lot deeper into, you know is it really even stealing or lifting the melody when it's wrapped in different elements like different words and things like that.
Yeah.
There was a case where I believe Katy Perry had allegedly stolen, I don't know, a four note minor key melody from, I don't know, like a Christian contemporary rapper or
Oh, I'm sure
something.
that's the case.
And well, she has roots in the CCM
Oh,
uh,
really? You know.
movement. Yeah, like way back. That was before she kissed a girl. But
Yeah.
there's an argument to be made. Did, can you copyright four notes in sequence? I think it was four. I could be wrong about that. There's a finite number of notes, and that number is even less, even fewer when you talk about notes that sound good together. You get 12 notes in an octave, but usually only seven of them sound good together. It's a
Yeah.
scale or a mode, and there are only so many chords that you can play, things like that. And so the order in which you can play them, that's fairly limited
Yeah.
in a way that makes it sound good. And we all want to make music, whether it's good or bad, has a message or doesn't. We all want to do something to create, and sometimes it might be standing on the shoulder of giants.
And we can. I'll end it just by saying that, like, I'm still on the fence. I'm undecided. I think it's a tricky issue, and you could think of it. I can understand both viewpoints, like from one side or the other. Um, as an artist, like as a self-proclaimed artist, I would say that like if somebody took something that I created and made something more with it, I wouldn't be upset with that. Just because personally, just because I don't know, maybe they'll as long as they credit me a little, if they did take it on intentionally, if it was unintentional, I don't know if that I would even be upset. But yeah, it gets messy real fast when money's involved, I think. And so that's the thing itself. But still art. I don't want to draw that line. I would hate for people to draw that line and say this is art or this is not art. I think that's incorrect to limit people that way. So I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll have more conversations about this, I'm sure.
yeah, I feel like we're going to have a lot more conversations about this topic as it comes up in the natural order of things. But I think it's probably a good time for us to conclude on Feel It Steel by Portugal the Man. Let's take a short break. This one's brought to you by 50 Shades of Grey Kitchenware. Now your pot can call your kettle slate or charcoal or silver, but they'll always match. We'll be right back. Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the TuneScore podcast. Our final song for this evening is Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. This was sort of our unanimous early decision for a song with a strong and memorable melody. But since I originally raised it as a potential subject, Kevin, why don't you prosecute the composition?
All right, sounds good. As far as the three songs that we looked at for this podcast, I think that the composition for this one was the strongest out of all three. As far as melody goes, I gave it a zero point 0.9 out of 1. So that's my highest score for the three. Lyrics also pretty high, zero point 0.8 out of 1. Rhythm also nice and strong, 0.7 out of 1. Harmony, a little bit less so. Um, there, present, didn't hear it so much, but still got some credit for that. As far as the composition goes, solid construction. This is simplicity at its finest. The melody is persistent and unmistakable. It sticks with you. You can't unhear it. The lyrics are poetic and they tell a story. I had one issue with the lyrics going through it when I did my deep dive, but it really resolved itself. The problem I was having was with the line, and the message coming from my eyes says, leave it alone. And I think it's just because of the placement. So, right before that, he's talking about lying in bed, smoking a cigarette, thinking over the things. And then he comes to, and the message coming from my eyes says something, but it doesn't really say anything. I was like, how's that say anything to yourself? That doesn't make any sense. But if you imagine a different scenario from the scene before that, where he's maybe sitting in front of an interviewer answering the same question over and over again about something he doesn't care about. Hey, are you guys you're divorced, but you're still in a band? How's that going? So his eyes roll, like, geez, like let's stop beating a dead horse. Can we talk about the music that I'm writing or something else? I think that's what he was going for there.
Well,
Um,
I think back at that time, they were still going through the charade of we're brother and sister. It's not an act. We're brother and sister, right?
is that really is that what's going on? Like, because
Back then, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's an interesting wrinkle there. I hadn't heard that. So,
Well, maybe this was from their, not their breakout, but the Elephant is the name of the album this came from. It was their biggest album, their biggest hit. I think by this point, it had probably come, the marriage certificate and divorce certificate and things like that had probably already come out into the public view. So maybe so. I don't know if I really heard a lot about that message of, I'm sitting in front of an interviewer answering the same question for the umpteenth time. I didn't necessarily get that specific out of the lyrical story, though.
Right on. And the last negative thing I had to say about it was really just that the rhyme scheme itself, the rhymes used were very fairly simple, but at the same time, like told a cogent story. Maybe it's still somewhat ambiguous, but I got a clear painted story in my mind.
Okay.
How'd you feel
Now,
about the composition there?
strong, not quite as strong, I think, as the other two songs that we've listened to for this episode, but I really liked it, and I have more of a personal connection to this song anyway, having heard it so many times over the years. I remember buying this album when it first came out, and listening to it pretty regularly. The melody, though, I like the vocal melody. I think it's strong, particularly on the fifth line of each verse. But it's that riff that's so memorable. You hear it in pubs, in sports stadia, the world over. Being a riff, I agree with you. Harmony in the traditional sense doesn't really feature in, so I give that just normal half credit. But melody and lyrics both, I gave 9/10 credit on each of those, and then the rhythm 8/10, because the drumming is very simple, but I feel like it provides the right foundation for the guitars and vocals. A lot is made about Meg White's drumming. It's being very primitive in a lot of, in really all cases. But if it weren't for Meg White drumming the way that she did, childlike, simple, however you want to call it, the White Stripes would not sound the way that they sound. The White Stripes would have sounded like Jack White sounds as a solo artist, or as he did with the Raconteurs. It's the simplicity and the restraint that make it timeless, in my opinion. And lyrically, I didn't have as many problems with anything in the lyrics. I think it's a tale of finding order out of chaos. It's a return to simplicity. And it mentions my hometown of Wichita. So that's nice. For the performance, nothing is overly complex about the performance, but it's all played and sung with feel. So I thought that was pretty strong. 0.9 out of 1.2 for the overall performance. And for the production, I felt like this is the right way, or an example of the right way, to overdub a single guitar riff to make it sound both full and fully realized. This riff started out, what you hear is the bass line. It's digitally altered by a guitar pedal to sound an octave down to make it sound like a bass. But that riff started out as, Jack White just noodling around in a sound check before a show one time. Just something simple to make sure that his guitar rig sounded the right way for that auditorium. But the essence of the riff is distilled with the low bass part, the higher slide guitar melody, and then extended as major chords for each root note. So you get a little bit of harmony, but it's very simple and very bluesy, the way that it's just the major chords for each root note. So fairly strong as far as the production. I was sort of expecting, listening to it with headphones for one of the first times ever, probably. I was expecting for the mix to be almost mono, but you hear the way that he overdubbed the various guitar parts, the way that the drums were mic'd up. There's a little bit of interesting panning, but not too much, like sweep panning, I should say. It was mixed really very well. So, yeah, again, strong points, 0.9 out of 1.2 for the production from me. But how did you feel about the performance and the production, Kev?
Felt very similarly, I think. Full marks for feel, for performance, for sure. Accuracy, maybe more of a zero point 0.5 out of 0.6 for that. The drums, again, are simple, but they're tight. The rhythm changes can make even a simple beat far more interesting. So it's a simple beat, but they change it up a little bit at appropriate times to make it sound great. the snare is added at like 33 seconds in. So you've already been going on for like 32 seconds. There's no snare. And then it just hits at the appropriate time to kind of change up the rhythm to make it feel a little bit different. I really love the idea of building and adding things in piece by piece. This is an excellent example of, just what moment do you bring something in that's new to create momentum in a piece? And they did it very well. The tempo is unchanging throughout, but we're making progress on a journey together. It's things are happening, things are changing. The only thing I could detract for really is, and this is arguable, but I could hear some sour hits on the drums. Not sure if that was just me over listening or if that was actually what was going on. Production also very high. I think zero point 0.5 out of zero point 0.6 for both, for mix and arrangement. The one thing I had trouble with was like, despite it's got a pervasive drum beat and bass line or augmented guitar riff, and even the dynamic changes were great, but at times during this song it kind of gets to be a little bit slow, a little bit boring to me. But overall, I think it was nice. And then if I'm jumping in, I'll jump into Appeal, if that's all right.
Sure.
This one's a little bit stronger than, or it might even be similar to how I rated Portugal the Man's song there. Definitely got 1.3 out of 1.6 for emotion. It just barely hit me, but it did. Innovation, whether or not this song in particular was super innovative, I just think that their music is pretty intelligently crafted, and this piece is very strong. So I give it an extra point, zero point 0.3 out of zero point 0.4. Repeat listenability is of course high, 1.4 out of 1.6. I love this song. You're gonna roll if I rolled across it on the radio. I probably wouldn't change it. I might change it like halfway through, change the station because I'm like, okay, let's move on. But no, this is a very great piece. This is definitely a more with less song. The empty space in between everything really makes it feel lonely. Just like we reviewed, I think the last one we reviewed, Adele, "Someone Like You," same trick,
Hmm.
and it's well utilized in this song.
Okay. Yeah, less is more, and sometimes more is more. And I think maybe that's why the guitars were overdubbed. If you listen to this in concert, say, where it's just Jack and Meg, probably sounds a little bit more sparse and a little bit more open and lonely. It's like jazz, man. It's the notes he's not playing. I think I rated it precisely the same as you did for the Appeal. Just slightly above 3/4 for both emotion and repeat listenability, and quarter credit for innovation. There's not much innovative about this track, and that's okay. It's like extra credit. Uh, you know, I mentioned that Elephant was the name of the album that this track originally featured on. It was the first track. I had that on repeat I was cruising around in my pickup for the better part of Ot 3 and Ot 4, I think it was. This is not even my favorite song from that record, but I think it stands the test of time in a way that some of the other songs might not, because I'm attached not only to those memories, but also something more universal and positive about its message. Plus, it just rocks, dude. I would say it is best listened to when you're getting sick of the drama coming at you from all angles, so you're feeling defiant, but you also know it's a better idea to just plot an exit strategy than to engage in battle. My final tune score on this was 7.6 out of 10.
And I think I gave it maybe a higher score on this one. Actually, I gave it a 8.1.
Now that feels like the scales of the universe balancing back out for you to rate something more highly than me. That's Seven Nation Army. This has been three top tier melodic songs. I think the question on everybody's mind, Kev, is what is the best melodic song of about the last 20 years? What do you think?
It's a good question. What are your thoughts on that? What's your pick?
Well, I think it's obviously Night Like This by LP.
I don't know that song.
Excellent, excellent melody. She's an excellent singer. I would check it out. Sorry, we didn't review it. That's kind of a disappointment for.
Did you think of it after we picked songs?
Yes,
Nice.
that's how it usually goes. That is how it usually goes.
That's fair. Out of the last, what was the time frame?
Oh, about 20 years.
20 years. That's a tough one. I'll just throw out, I'll probably say Welcome Home by Coheed and Cambria. That's probably going to be my pick.
Never heard of it.
Never
But
heard of
you
it.
heard it here first, folks. You've got 3 top tier melodic songs: Familiar Feeling, Feel It Still, and Seven Nation Army, plus a couple of bonus tracks, Night Like This. And sorry, what was the Coheed song?
Welcome Home.
Welcome Home. So you've got a brief 5-song playlist to go check out. Give those bands some love if you love them. Let us know if you disagree with our commentary or our selections. But I think it's time to wrap it up for today. My name is Carrie Nightingale. That's been Kevin Niebrick. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. We have a lot of fun with this, and we hope you come back for the next episode. Take care.